Steve Merril, I need your top 3 winning strategies to handicap the NBA.
Basketball's basketball, right? Well, for someone that's coached 5th, 6th grade AAU, middle school girls, AAU, middle school as well, not all basketball is equal. And what's interesting at the low levels, like 6th and 7th grade, it's all press. The teams that can press and can't handle the press get blown out of the gym. Then you go to high school and even college. We see some teams still press in college, but you never see them press in the NBA. And I always accentuate this to the kids because they're just too good. They pass the ball so well. They dribble so well. You never see a team play full court press. So my point is that handicapping the NBA is different than even handicapping college basketball. And you have to have a different mindset. I've done extremely well with both for over 30 years, consistent winners in both. And look, I talk about watching less games than ever. I hardly ever watch regular season NBA. The only reason I do is to maybe get some information on a team that's switched some players, maybe a tempo or coaching philosophy change. But there again, I can get that from the recap, from the box score, from reading the local newspapers. And I found that's a more useful part of my time. But the key to handicapping the NBA, without a doubt, during the regular season is motivation. All these teams have college all-stars. They're all great shooters. They're all fantastic athletes. But motivation's the key. And this is why a lot of people struggle with the NBA and they feel like it's difficult to handicap. And it's funny. The two things that recreational bettors feel are toughest to handicap are the NBA and the NFL preseason. And the key to both of those is motivation. The NFL preseason, it's about motivation. You throw the stats out. The NBA, I look at some stats, but for more, it's about motivation. What I mean by that is did they just have a big win? Do they have a big game on deck? Is it a 3 and 4 nights? Is it a no-rest travel spot? Load management. We're seeing that more than ever the last several seasons when key players will just sit out every other game for a borderline injury. What's interesting about the load management, though, is that the line has been moving tremendously for several years now, 3, 4, 5 points on a star player. Yet more times than not, 60% plus, if you just play that team that is shorthanded without their key player, they've covered the spread. And there's a couple reasons why. First of all, the line has been vastly over-adjusted, but it's also because the other team overlooks them, and I think they have less motivation, whereas the shorthanded team has more motivation. And once again, you got college all-stars stepping up in the role of the star player, and also you get better team play sometimes. One other angle I'll throw out that is similar, though, to college is revenge. Second meetings, I like to dig into those box scores from earlier meetings, but once again, you got to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. Make sure all the same star players are in the lineup and there hasn't been a change in coaching or philosophy. But college and handicapping and NBA handicapping are pretty different. The revenge second meeting stuff is somewhat similar, but otherwise it's all about motivation, baby. You got to make sure that team's ready to play that night.
You are absolutely right. College players seem to be motivated every single night, where the NBA does not. Steve Merril, number 2. Your number 2 top strategy to win in the NBA is?
Current form. And this goes a little bit with motivation, but what I mean by current form is I said you can't really look at the statistics, and I put a little asterisk next to that. The last 5 or 10 games are what I'm looking at. I'm not looking at the overall seasonal statistics hardly ever. But what I like to do when I look at the season statistics to see has there been a big change in the last 5 or 10 games. Now, some of that can be random variance. Some of it can be the fact they played really tough teams or really weak teams. But a lot of times it's because there's been a change within the season and maybe the philosophy of the coach, sometimes a coaching change itself. We see that often spark a team in all the daily sports like hockey, baseball, basketball. They always say you can't fire the entire roster midseason, so you got to fire the coach to try to make a change or spark the players. So do pay attention to the last 5 or 10, but more importantly, try to find out if something has changed, because I do feel the odds makers base the line still, the starting numbers, on the overall season of work. And by taking kind of a sub-season within the overall season, a trees versus the forest approach, which was the opposite of what I normally do with handicapping, as I've said earlier, you can sometimes find little nuggets and ride teams. And also, I use another financial market analogy. Don't try to catch a falling knife. That's trying to predict the bottom of the stock market or a commodity that's dropping or an individual stock. Let it bottom out first, and you'll see teams, whether it's point spreads or over-unders, going extreme runs. They'll go over 10 out of 11 games. You want to ride that momentum in the short term and don't try to predict the bottom, catch that falling knife. So short-term momentum in the NBA can actually be your friend. I recommend looking at the last 5 to 10 games. And also keep an eye on injuries. That also goes to current form. Once again, I talked about star players being out, but some of the secondary guys can make a big difference. Like maybe a guy at second or third on the team in assist or 3-point shooting doesn't get a lot of pub. That isn't reflected in the number a lot of times. And it also can lead to a team doing a lot better or a lot worse during a 5 or 10 game span. But then when that guy comes back is when you find tremendous value riding a team for the next couple of weeks. So current form is very important when handicapping the NBA. Not so much in college hoops. There's key players in college, but as you said, Kelly, they usually come to play every night, and they don't play as many games. They only play twice a week. So current form and load management is so important in the NBA when handicapping.
This is a theory, if you will. I don't know if that's actually what it is, but we see it every year during the NBA finals. People bring it up now. It used to be kind of an under the radar, in my opinion, but now it's all I hear about on X. Speaking of X, at Steve Merril, 2 R's, 1 L on X.
I'm on Twitter too, by the way.
Yeah, same, Steve. Same. All jokes aside, the zigzag theory. Talk to me about this one.
You just did some great videos with Teddy Covers, and I wish I'd gone first because I would have told you to piss Teddy off by telling him that the zigzag is the best handicapping strategy ever. Teddy gives you that scowl, that patented Teddy Covers look. I get him every year this time. About March, is April's when the NBA playoffs start, and I always tell Teddy, play the zigzag. Zigzag doesn't work anymore. And it doesn't. If you blindly play the zigzag, and first of all, for new bettors out there, that just means like in a best of 7 series, you're playing the opposite result. So if the home team wins game 1, you play the road team to cover game 2. If game 1 goes over, you play the under in game 2. It's kind of, and it used to work great in the 90s. And like you said, Kelly, it was a really good strategy a while ago. Doesn't work like it used to. But what I tell Teddy, as is anything in life, it's all about balance. It's the modified zigzag. So that's my new term. I'm a patent that. I'm a trademark. The modified zigzag is what works in the NBA. And what I mean by that is there are certain situations you do want to look to zig, others where you want to zag. Just like revenge in college basketball. And by the way, revenge is basically a zigzag theory. You're playing the team that lost the first game. And what do we look for when we're playing revenge, whether it's college or pro basketball? We're looking for Class A teams, focus spot, maybe coming off a loss, maybe an embarrassing loss in that revenge situation, maybe a strong home court. Same thing I look for in the NBA playoffs with the zigzag is I like to play Class A teams off the loss, especially at home, maybe off a blowout loss in the NBA playoffs. Those are angles that continue to work well for decades. What you don't want to look for is asking the inferior team to do something for you. And we talked about this in the college basketball video. In general, bad teams that lost the first or even the second time, they get swept. But the good teams normally don't. So once again, the zigzag works, the modified zigzag, and that's playing the better team in the right situation. The other thing I'll point out, too, as far as over-unders, I love digging into those box scores, especially in a 7-game playoff series, because from one game to the next, it amazes me how the odds makers will bump the total up 2 or 3 points or down 2 or 3 points because of a very high or low scoring game than the game before. But a lot of times it's just random variance. Teams are lights out, like 40, 50% from 3-point range. What you want to look at is the pace of play because that usually stays more consistent. And the other reason the zigzag does work, especially with quality teams, is because teams make adjustments, whereas the team that won the game, they don't necessarily get complacent, but what if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? If it worked for you, don't make a change. The other team makes the adjustment, and that's another reason we see some crazy turnarounds in the NBA playoffs. A team can win by 20 and then go and lose by 20 the very next game. So the zigzag does still work, but it's got to be the modified zigzag in the right spots.
He is Steve Merril. You guys can head over to wagertalk.com, wt.buzz/SM. You get 25% off one of his daily packages or all access pass up to 1 full year using coupon code TIPS25. That is TIPS25. You only get 1 per user, so make sure you use it wisely.